Hi folks, you're with Tassus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the wider ideology and implications and even the mechanics of Western divorce. Now I'll go through a couple of examples and scenarios, and I'm going to present the overall argument that is really only in the advanced Western nations. That's the only place where particularly men own property and thus have wealth. It's the only place in the world where, other than upper class divorce, it's the only place in the world where middle class men who've made their own money are being taxed, if you will, just in terms of wealth transfer. So they're stealing money from men, and let's call it what it is, it's stealing money from men to give to women as a dutiless entitlement because of equity. Now, this has been going on for a while. It's not something that started yesterday or the day before. It's been going on since, since I suppose the late 1960s, early 1970s. Ronald Reagan, as governor of California, signed the modern divorce law model into law in California in the 70s. Who would have thought? Also, by the way, the president that gave amnesty to millions of illegal Mexican illegal aliens. But anyway, that's he was one of the great globalist presidents. So we need to recognise that in looking back on it. But just coming back to the divorce thing, what got me sort of talking about this was two recent divorces where in one case the man has behaved very sensibly, very prudently, very carefully with money. He's been very careful generally with money. And so it accumulated quite a few assets, a house and other things that could be stolen from him in the event of divorce. Then another one where they both were very spendthrift, had a great time, partied, had some great vacations. But when the divorce came, they kind of had nothing. There was nothing there. So she couldn't get anything. So I'll just talk a little bit about those two divorces, and then sort of a rich and a poor divorce or rich and a middle class divorce by comparison. So here's scenario one. They were kind of a bit of a power couple, I guess. He was making quite a bit more than her, but they went to a lot of wild parties. They drank a lot of booze, snorted a lot of coke. They had some great vacations. They didn't think twice about spending serious money on a couple of vacations each year. And they just as soon as money came in the door, it went out the door, and they were going out to fine restaurants and when either of them had a party, they just would hire out a really swanky place and have a great time. So come divorce, even though they'd made a lot of money over the years, come divorce, they just had nothing. Now the court sort of was clearly upset about that the guy had nothing to take, that he had nothing there that they could take and give to her. And the court, the ideological divorce courts, and they're very ideological, full of Marxist activists and so on. They wanted, well, how do we create equity? How do we reward? Because it's a reward. Women that leave their husbands, or when then simply the relationship dissolves, the woman must be rewarded. Is the view. So anyway, they loaded the guy up with all sorts of alimony and very inventive sort of child support requirements and so on. So effectively, the child support that you're supposed to pay, he was paying probably 160%, if you like, of the mandatory required child support. So he looked at that and thought, why the fuck would I work if they're gonna be into me for this much? But they were hitting him up for all this extra. I mean, he was a straight white male, member of the patriarchy, a de facto fucking Nazi, and they were going to stick it up him. So he decided, the company he worked for, and they offered sort of like study scholarships to go to university. So he went back to school effectively, and was determined to draw that as much as possible. This reduced his income very considerably, and therefore reduced the amount that he had to pay. There was like a percentage sort of formula. Because he was paying quite a bit less than she'd expected, she had to then upgrade her job, and she downgraded it. So to upgrade her job, her mother was looking after the children. So anyway, and she even stopped him from seeing the children, so she could again bump up some of the income he had to pay her. But still, with his now reduced income, so she got no house. It was something she'd been surprised about. She was convinced that he must be sitting on pots of money, but then she'd been more than eager, very eager participant in the parties and the snorting and the going out for dinner and the vacation. She loved it. But somehow wanted both. Lots of assets from a very prudent, careful lifestyle, and also, lots of party time and lots of yeah. So he ended up reducing his income. So really, it was a defeat for everybody. The ideology lost, she lost, the children lost, he's lost. Well, I'm not sure his career will recover from this, but he was a pretty hardworking, industrious guy. He's the sort of guy that did well at school. He's the sort of guy that will acquire assets and do well for himself in a capitalist, middle class based capitalist society. So, but he was particularly screwed simply because of patriarchy, ideology, and straight white male, and so on. And he's smart enough to know that. And as he said to me, "Why the fuck should I pay this extra tax? It's a super ideological tax just because I'm a straight white male. Why the fuck should I pay it?" And he's right. And there are many men who are sort of dropping out and refusing promotions and trying to avoid getting performance bonuses simply because they don't want to have to give it all away to an ex-wife or ex-partner, just because it's an ideologically insane divorce system in the West. Now, they don't have these same divorce systems in other countries. Well, why not? Because no one's got anything to take. I mean, you look at in South America as an example, and it's a lot of dirt poor banana republics there, between 70 and 75% of all dwellings and their shanty shacks, 70 to 75% of all dwellings have dirt floors. Same number has no reliable running water or no sewage or electricity. Or electricity is so intermittent that you just can't rely on it. Even people with stable, steady jobs, that you would say would be sort of kind of middle class, I guess, if they had that equivalent there. There's just not many of them. Maybe at best 10 to 15% are living that sort of bourgeois lifestyle. In fact, even that's rather generous. And the standard of living, even at the bourgeois level, in South American terms, bourgeois, even that's not so good. It's still probably a working class type existence for being in the West. So the reason they don't have those sort of divorce things going on there is because hardly anyone's got anything to take, and when they've got something to take, it's 2/5 of fuck all. The other side of it in dirt poor basket cases, countries like in Africa and elsewhere, most of the property, if not all of it, is community owned. The village or the community owns it in a communal sort of communist sense, so you can't have it taken from you and you can't give it to someone else. So it's only where there's private property in a capitalist society where hard work is rewarded. And it's just, so divorce in the West is just a super ideological tax on men. That's effective. Now, I know you get outliers. There are women who've made money, and people point to, well, what about the divorce of some female rock star, Adele. Adele's an example where she's a songwriter and singer, got a great voice, and she's done very well. But how many Adeles are there? There's like one in every million, or 1 in every 2 million, or something. There are hardly any Adeles in the world. And it's just a handful of them. And so when they get divorced, and it's big news, then they're paying out to an ex-partner. But in terms of middle class men that bust their ass and buy a house, then there are hundreds of millions of them in the West. So they're disproportionately screwed for the 1 in a million Adeles that are in the world. So now looking at another divorce, he's a guy who he's got a good job again, works hard, studied hard, applies himself, very conscientious, very industrious, and he's done all right. He's got a good job, pays good money. He's very careful with money, constantly fighting with his wife about keeping the expenses under control. She wants to run riot and spend money and scatter it shotgun-like in all directions. He's very careful, very prudent, very considerate. Always wants to make sure there's money set aside for a rainy day. The maintenance on the house is diligently taken care of. The school fee, everything's paid on time. The school fees, the cars are well maintained. He writes very thoughtful letters to the parents and schools association members, and attends the meetings with the children, and that's very, very kind, very diligent guy. Very careful with money, very prudent, doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble, that sort of guy. But anyway, he's boring, so she decides to leave him. But because of his careful management of money, he's bought a house. She's contributed almost nothing to it. They've bought a house. Got a nice block of land and some other investments, and he's put aside money for retirement, and all-round diligent, careful, prudent guy. Now, but because of that, when they get divorced, he's got a shitload of stuff that they can take. And the ideological fanatics in the divorce courts go, wow, look at all this stuff. Not only has he got, he's never been unemployed, he's always had an above average income. So they can take the house, or they can give her a fully furnished house with a car. They can give her retirement savings. There's a whole lot of shit they can give her, and they can give her a shitload of stuff, and they do. So, and he's such a conscientious guy. He's going to keep on working so they can hit him up for maximum child support and alimony, which they do. So here's the tale of two divorces: the careful, prudent guy, the sort of guy you want in any society. He's the bedrock of society, but he's screwed to the max, and they take everything from him you can. Whereas the spendthrift guy, who's very la-di-da with his cash, as she was, by the way, very la-di-da with the money, he's got nothing, and so they have to double screw him on his future income. So again, you have the same thing, a special super ideological tax on straight white men who are conscientious, hardworking, and so on. The fact that they've got own houses and property in this, it wasn't gifted to them. They didn't get it as some part of some fucking race or gender quota. They had to work hard for it. They had to go without, live a Spartan lifestyle when required, and have a lot of self-denial. Gratification can be down the road. They don't have to have instant gratification. All these sorts of things that make the bedrock of Western middle class democratic rule of law society. Instead, they're screwing the crap out of these guys. Now I'll look at the difference between a rich and middle class divorce. Now, when a middle class guy, say he's 40 or something, gets royally screwed over in the divorce courts, which they do, very hard for them to bounce back from that. They've got to pretty much start right from the beginning again. Very hard for them to bounce back. Some do it, but it's not easy. And the older they get, obviously the harder hang out, rely on them. So they're screwed. Most of them are finished. She's handsomely rewarded with his hard work and so on, and his deferred gratification. Now look at, say, a person or a very well-connected person, because they're still screwed in the courts. The courts at least a person, because they're still screwed in the courts. The courts at least are pretty divorced, and she gets the beachfront property. Comes from a wealthy family, so then he gets his family, because they're so well-to-do, they just buy him another beachfront property. He's got to pay, alimony and child support and that sort of thing. Quite a lot of it, but it's nothing to him. He complains to his folks, his rich folks, that that's getting in the way of him leading the sort of life he wants to lead. They go, not a problem. We'll pay it for you, and they do. So he's unaffected. His life's unchanged, pretty much. He's still got the beachfront property. He's still driving the Maserati. He's still got plenty of money to goof off through his very wealthy folks, their connections. He's still got very prestigious, well-paid employment and so on. So he's kind of unaffected. Okay, she's gone. Well, fine. And he's looking for the next trophy wife now. It makes no difference. His day-to-day life's just completely unaffected. Now, look at a guy who's just, well, not necessarily rich, but well-connected. He's one of these well-connected public servant types, and he's on a good income. Again, he got hammered in the divorce courts. He's straight white male, got hammered in the divorce courts, but he's very well connected, and he goes to his network of buddies in the senior echelons of the public service. He says, look, I've lost my house, and my retirement savings have been cut to ribbons. I've got to pay child support and alimony. I'm sort of doing it tough for you guys. Not a problem, says the network. And they give him all these very lucrative consulting jobs where he need do nothing. He doesn't have to turn up, or he turns up once a year for a meeting. And so his income, which is say around 250 or thereabout, jumps to close to 900,000 a year. And within a few years, he's kind of rebuilt himself financially. He's back to where he was before the divorce, and he's fine. So they've looked after him. They still give him that so they also go to his ex-wife and say, look, we'll give you a cozy job in the public service as some sort of consultant on really the same amount of money as you get from him for child support and alimony, that sort of stuff. We'll give you this cozy job, overseas travel benefits, you get a car, you get all this sort of thing, and we'll do that for you if you stop claiming child support. So the taxpayer is now directly paying this child support and alimony to this woman simply so they can look after one of their buddies. And these sorts of things just go on all the fucking time. These people sort of well looked after at that level. So it shows you or demonstrates or illustrates, say, how divorce can affect different people in different ways. And I'll just close off with another one. These were two lesbian academics. Now they're both senior professors, teaching like the gender studies sort of crap. They're not, they probably couldn't get a job as a kindergarten teacher in the real world, but they're quite a prestigious university actually, and they're both reasonably well paid. Now one of them's very careful with money, the other not so much, and they've been in a relationship for quite some years. When the relationship came apart, one of the lesbians said that the other one had 3 or 4 times more retirement savings than she did, and therefore she was taking the other lesbian to the family court, saying, "Well, I should get half of all those retirement savings." Because equity, equal outcomes, that sort of crap. Now it doesn't fly when 2 lesbians or 2 homosexuals go to it. So the divorce court, family court says, well, look, you both have equal social power. You're both lesbians, you're both academics, you have in social power. You're both lesbians, you're both academics, you have analysed that because you've already got equal social power. But if you're a straight white fucking male, you damn fascist Nazi, fucking white supremacist, motherfucker, if you're that, then you have more social power. And we're going to screw the crap out of you and reward someone else who's done nothing to justify or deserve it. So it's interesting looking at how the family courts are looking at, and just confirms their complete ideological view of things rather than any view of reality. That the whole thing is based on ideological Marxist concepts of social power, which any Western government could stop in a second and say, no, you can't do it that way. You must go on who contributes to the relationship or to the assets or but that would heavily favour straight white men, and they won't do it, like race and gender quotas and so on. It's done to create this illusion, Marxist equal outcomes. But it goes to show you how deeply flawed it is from any practical or realistic sense. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.